In the dim light of a rehearsal room in Richmond, Virginia, a man once hailed as the savior of soul music sits alone at a piano. His fingers hover above the keys, trembling slightly, not from age, but from memory. The silence is almost sacred, heavy with the echoes of applause long faded. This is D'Angelo, the Black Messiah, who vanished when the world was still singing his name. There was a time when his voice could melt the hardest hearts, when his music carried the sensual fire of Prince and the spiritual depth of Marvin Gaye. Yet behind that brilliance lay a storm. Fame, expectations, and the unbearable weight of being called the new Messiah began to tear at his soul. The man who once sang "How Does It Feel?" was now asking himself that very question in the dark. At the peak of his power, he disappeared. No farewell, no scandalous confession, just silence. For years, rumors spread like smoke. Addiction, depression, fear of the spotlight. The industry moved on, but his absence became a ghost that haunted music itself. The neo-soul revolution had lost its prophet. But legends don't die in silence. Deep within that darkness, something stirred. Pain gave way to reflection, and reflection to resurrection. The D'Angelo who would return was not the same man who left. He had been broken, rebuilt, and baptized in the fire of his own creation. This is not just the story of a singer. It's the story of a man who fell from grace and dared to rise again. From church pews to chaos, from isolation to rebirth. This is the untold journey of D'Angelo, the soul that disappeared, and the Black Messiah who came back to reclaim his voice. Before the headlines, before the silence, before the myth, there was Michael Eugene Archer, a quiet child from Richmond, Virginia, raised in the shadows of gospel choirs and wooden church pews. The world would one day know him as D'Angelo, but long before the fame, he was simply a boy searching for God through music. His earliest melodies were prayers, his rhythms, confessions. And maybe that's why, when he finally found fame, it felt more like a test of faith than a reward. This story is not about stardom. It's about the cost of it. It's about what happens when a man's gift becomes his burden. D'Angelo's rise in the mid-90s wasn't just another success story. It was a movement. He didn't just sing, he channeled. His music was raw, spiritual, and deeply human. But behind every whispered note and smoldering groove, there was a man slowly disappearing beneath the weight of expectation. In this documentary, we'll walk through the triumphs and tragedies of D'Angelo's life. From his early church roots, through the blazing success of Brown Sugar and Voodoo, to the years of silence that followed. We'll uncover the battles no spotlight ever captured, and the redemption that came when the world had almost forgotten his name. So before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. It really helps us bring more untold stories like this one to life. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? Your city, your country. Every story we tell connects us through music, pain, and redemption. Now take a deep breath, dim the lights and listen closely, because this is not just about D'Angelo. This is about the soul we all lose, and the courage it takes to find it again. Long before the world knew his name, before the slow grooves and candlelit stages, there was a small church on the corner of Southside Richmond where a young boy sat at a weathered, upright piano. His name was Michael Eugene Archer. The congregation called him quiet, but his hands spoke loud. Each note he played felt like a plea, a dialogue between heaven and earth. His father, a Pentecostal minister, preached fire and salvation. His mother, a devout believer, filled the home with hymns. D'Angelo was born between gospel and guilt, a boy raised in the sound of devotion. From the first time his fingers touched the keys, something stirred inside him. He wasn't just playing songs, he was decoding emotions. Music became his prayer, his rebellion, his language. At 10 years old, He could already translate the feeling of a sermon into a melody. While other kids chased basketballs through the streets, he chased chords, lost in the rhythm, searching for something divine. The church gave him roots, but the radio gave him wings. He'd stay up late at night tuning into forbidden frequencies: Prince, Marvin Gaye, Al Green, Stevie Wonder. The first time he heard Sign of the Times, he said it felt like a door opening to another world. It was funk, it was freedom. It was everything his father's pulpit could never give him. By his teenage years, Richmond couldn't contain him anymore. He began sneaking into open mics, performing covers that silenced rooms. His voice carried the warmth of gospel and the danger of sin. Something pure, yet undeniably seductive. It wasn't just that he could sing, it was that he could feel what he sang. At 16, he formed a local group called Michael Archer and Precise. They played talent shows and school dances, covering everyone from Parliament Funkadelic to Smokey Robinson. It was in those sweaty gymnasiums and makeshift stages that the persona of D'Angelo began to emerge, an artist unafraid to blend the sacred with the sensual. While his peers dreamed of fame, D'Angelo dreamed of transcendence. He wanted to touch souls, not charts, but his father's sermons about temptation and pride echoed in his mind. Every time he stepped closer to the secular world, he felt the invisible pull of guilt. That internal tension between salvation and seduction would one day become the heartbeat of his music. In 1991, at just 17, he won the amateur night competition at the legendary Apollo Theater in Harlem. It was his first trip to New York, his first brush with destiny. The audience didn't just applaud, they rose to their feet. A gospel boy from Richmond had just conquered the most unforgiving stage in America. That victory caught the attention of industry scouts. But more than a record deal, what D'Angelo took from Harlem was conviction. He realized that soul music wasn't just about romance, it was about truth. The stage felt like an altar, and he, the reluctant preacher, was ready to deliver his sermon to the world. When he returned home, he wrote furiously. Late nights turned into early mornings, notebooks filled with lyrics that mixed prayer with pain. His mother would find him asleep at the piano, hands still resting on the keys, as if afraid the music might vanish if he let go. By the time he was 20, a demo tape titled Brown Sugar was circulating among producers. The sound was unlike anything on the radio, raw, smooth, spiritual and sensual all at once. The boy from the church was now standing at the edge of something much bigger, a movement that would redefine soul for a new generation. When Brown Sugar dropped in 1995, it wasn't just an album, it was a seismic shift. The airwaves had been dominated by glossy R&B and hip-hop bravado, but D'Angelo's sound arrived like a ghost from another time, with its smoky bass lines, loose drums, and gospel-infused melodies. It felt both ancient and new. Critics called it a revival, but it was more than that. It was a resurrection of feeling, the rebirth of soul in an era that had almost forgotten it. The opening track, Brown Sugar, was seductive but spiritual, smooth yet dangerous. D'Angelo's voice curled around every syllable like incense in a church. It wasn't about excess or image, it was about essence. Songs like Lady, Cruisin', and Higher weren't built for the charts, they were built for connection. The album wasn't a performance, it was a confession. The industry didn't know what to do with him. D'Angelo wasn't the typical R&B heartthrob. He refused to play by the pop machine's rules. No glitter, no choreography, no PR gloss. He wore jeans, sometimes a beanie, and spoke softly in interviews. Yet the more mysterious he became, the more people leaned in. Audiences could sense something real, something raw. The success of Brown Sugar gave birth to a cultural movement. Alongside artists like Erykah Badu, Maxwell and Lauryn Hill, D'Angelo helped define what the world would soon call neo-soul. It was the sound of rebellion wrapped in velvet, a return to authenticity in a world obsessed with perfection. He became its reluctant leader, a title that both honored and haunted him. Behind the scenes, D'Angelo's creative process was intense, almost spiritual. He obsessed over every chord, every drum tone. He once spent hours chasing a single snare sound until it felt human enough. His studio sessions weren't just recordings, they were rituals. Those who worked with him described the atmosphere as church-like, filled with candles, incense, and long silences. But success, as always, came with its shadow. Suddenly, the church boy from Richmond was being called a sex symbol. Magazine covers, talk shows, and music videos turned him into something he never intended to be, an idol. The same purity that had drawn people to his music was now being consumed by the machinery of fame. Still, he pressed on. Touring the world, D'Angelo found himself standing before tens of thousands, his voice echoing through arenas that once only held his prayers. But somewhere between the spotlight and the stage smoke, he began to lose his footing. The line between artist and image started to blur. He once said in an interview, "They don't hear the music anymore, they just see the body." The world that had embraced him for his soul was now obsessed with his skin. For a man raised in the church, the adoration felt dangerously close to blasphemy. Yet amidst the noise, D'Angelo's artistry continued to deepen. He began writing for others, experimenting with funk and jazz, blending pain with poetry. His songs hinted at inner conflict, love and guilt, divinity and desire, fame and loneliness. His soul had become both his canvas and his cage. By the end of the decade, he was no longer just a rising star. He was the pulse of a generation. But as the world prepared for his next masterpiece, few realized that D'Angelo himself was already slipping into a storm of self-doubt and silence. The revolution he had started was about to cost him everything. By 2000, D'Angelo had become a man both revered and hunted. The release of Voodoo wasn't just an album drop, it was a cultural earthquake. Fans, critics, and musicians waited with bated breath, and when it finally hit the speakers, the world collectively exhaled. The music was thick, swampy, intimate, a living organism pulsing with every heartbeat. The grooves were human, imperfect, alive. Every note, every whispered lyric carried the weight of his soul. Tracks like Untitled, How Does It Feel, didn't just make audiences listen, they made them feel. It was sensual, spiritual, and raw. His falsetto floated over thick, slapping bass lines. His rhythm was elastic, almost defying time. The songs were confessions, prayers, seductions, all intertwined. The album was not for the casual listener. It demanded attention, devotion, and vulnerability. Behind the studio doors, D'Angelo was a perfectionist bordering on obsession. He spent endless hours, sometimes days, chasing the perfect groove or vocal inflection. The sessions were spiritual exercises, a marriage of craft and catharsis. The musicians who joined him swore it was like witnessing a shaman channeling a higher power. Every beat, every chord was ritualistic, each mistake embraced as a touch of humanity. But the weight of genius is often invisible. Fame, expectation, and self-imposed perfection began to crush him from the inside. He felt the pressure of being the savior of soul, the heir to an unspoken throne of musical messiahs. Critics hailed him as a visionary, but for D'Angelo, the accolades were chains. Each performance, each photograph, each gaze from an audience added layers of anxiety and self-doubt. The music videos and media attention intensified the scrutiny. Untitled, How Does It Feel, made him a global sex symbol overnight, a role he neither sought nor felt comfortable inhabiting. The body that had been trained to channel divinity was now fetishized, objectified, dissected by millions. The spiritual and the sensual collided violently, leaving him exposed in ways that fame never warned him about. Tours became a gauntlet. Exhaustion, pressure, and the intoxicating combination of adoration and obsession took their toll. Friends and collaborators watched as the vibrant, enigmatic artist gradually withdrew into himself. Late-night studio sessions became solitary marathons. Hotel rooms became prisons. The man who once shared his soul so freely now hid behind silence, fear, and sometimes substances. Yet even in darkness, the music persisted. Every performance, every chord retained its humanity. D'Angelo's genius was not diminished by struggle. It was intensified by it. Pain and vulnerability became part of the sonic texture, turning Voodoo into an album that was not only groundbreaking but timeless. Listeners could feel the struggle woven into every groove, every vocal inflection. He began to vanish from the public eye. Rumors of addiction, depression, and retreat spread. The media speculated endlessly, fans worried, and the music world mourned an absence it could barely articulate. Yet D'Angelo's silence was intentional. A self-preservation strategy, a search for authenticity, a spiritual retreat from the chaos he had helped create. Behind closed doors, he grappled with the duality of his life, the sacred and the profane, the music and the myth, the devotion to craft and the human fragility it revealed. Each day was a negotiation between creation and destruction. Each night was a meditation, a struggle to reconcile the man and the legend. By the mid-2000s, D'Angelo had disappeared almost completely from public consciousness. Yet, like any true artist, the fire never fully went out. In the quiet, in the shadows, the seeds of a resurrection were being planted. The return of the Black Messiah, ready to reclaim his voice, his soul, and his place in the pantheon of music history. After the whirlwind of Voodoo, D'Angelo disappeared. Not quietly, but intentionally, retreating from the glare of the spotlight, from the weight of expectation, from the very industry that had once exalted him. Richmond became a refuge, a place to breathe, to grieve, and to rediscover the boy who had first touched a piano in a sunlit church. Silence became both shield and mirror. During these years, rumors swirled. Some whispered of addiction, others spoke of depression, of a man lost to the pressures of fame. Yet few understood the complexity of his withdrawal. It was not surrender, it was survival. Every note he had ever sung had carried pieces of his soul, and he needed time to reclaim what was left. In the quiet, D'Angelo explored life outside the stage. He walked streets without cameras, laughed without applause, and listened to the world with ears untainted by expectation. It was a period of reflection, a slow process of remembering who he was beyond the mask, beyond the body, beyond the music that had consumed him. Friends and collaborators occasionally glimpsed him, sometimes in studios, sometimes in the intimacy of small jam sessions. These encounters revealed a man changed, softer yet more intense, wiser yet still haunted. The genius remained, but it was tempered by understanding, a humility forged in absence and struggle. This period of retreat was also a spiritual journey. Music had always been his prayer. Now he sought answers in silence and simplicity. The church melodies of his youth intertwined with the grooves of his adolescence, shaping compositions that were intimate, reflective, and profound. D'Angelo was not hiding from the world. He was preparing for a return worthy of the legend he had become. Every song he wrote during these years carried layers of meaning. Lyrics became journals, melodies became confessions. Friends recalled evenings spent listening to him play, often alone, fingers moving across keys and strings, as if channeling centuries of music, pain, and wisdom. These moments, private and sacred, laid the foundation for his future masterpiece. The years of absence also reshaped his relationship with his audience. No longer performing for adoration, he performed for truth. He understood the responsibility of his voice, the gravity of his presence, and the intimacy music demanded. His silence had taught him patience, discipline, and reverence for the art that once nearly destroyed him. When he finally re-emerged, it was with intention. The anticipation was palpable, yet D'Angelo approached it not as a return to fame, but as a continuation of a journey paused. Every note, every rhythm, every lyric was deliberate, a testament to survival, wisdom, and the unbroken spirit of a man who had faced his own shadows. The world heard glimpses of this transformation with live performances and collaborations, but it was his 2014 album, Black Messiah, that announced the full reclamation of his voice. Here was the D'Angelo who had once vanished, but now stronger, more authentic, and unafraid to confront both personal demons and societal truths. The long silence had not diminished him, it had honed him. In absence, he found presence. In retreat, he found strength. In reflection, he found rebirth. The Black Messiah was no longer a title of expectation, but a declaration of resilience. The man who had disappeared had returned, whole, ready to reclaim his throne not through spectacle, but through the timeless power of his music. D'Angelo's influence stretches far beyond the notes he played or the albums he released. He became the blueprint for a generation of artists who sought authenticity over artifice, feeling over flash. Names like Frank Ocean, Anderson .Paak, H.E.R., and even Beyoncé cite him as a guiding spirit, proof that the quiet genius from Richmond left a mark on music that can never be erased. His return with Black Messiah was more than a comeback. It was a statement. It reminded the world that soul could be political, spiritual, and deeply personal all at once. Tracks like Really Love and The Charade carried weight, commentary, intimacy, and raw emotion in equal measure. He had not only survived, he had evolved into a voice capable of challenging both hearts and minds. In interviews, collaborators spoke of D'Angelo's meticulous nature, his obsession with nuance, and his refusal to compromise. He wasn't just a performer, he was a craftsman, a storyteller, a shaman, guiding listeners through the depths of human experience. Every chord, every silence, every groove was intentional, a conversation between artist and audience that transcended time. The stage remained a sacred place for him. Unlike many contemporary performers, he approached each show with reverence, treating every venue as a cathedral and every audience member as a witness to something profound. His performances were immersive rituals, blending vulnerability and charisma in a way few artists can replicate. D'Angelo's personal journey, the struggles with fame, the withdrawal, the eventual reclamation of self, became a story in itself. He humanized the myth of the rock and soul icon, showing that even the most extraordinary talents are fallible, vulnerable, and in need of introspection. His life became a lesson in endurance, artistry, and the courage to return stronger than before. Beyond the music, his presence reshaped culture. Neo-soul, once a niche genre, gained legitimacy and reverence because of his contributions. His blending of jazz, funk, gospel, and R&B created a soundscape that was uniquely his own, one that inspired not only listeners, but fellow musicians to experiment, innovate, and dig deeper into the roots of black musical tradition. Even as the years pass, D'Angelo's aura remains palpable. He doesn't dominate headlines, and that's precisely the point. His legacy is not in constant visibility, but in the echoes of his influence. In the subtle ways his music continues to touch lives, challenge artists, and remind listeners of the raw power of honesty in art. Fans speak of intimate moments, discovering Brown Sugar in a college dorm room, hearing Voodoo on vinyl late at night, feeling Black Messiah pulse through their headphones during times of personal reflection. D'Angelo's music became a companion, a confidant, a mirror reflecting human complexity. That is the true measure of his genius, connection beyond commerce. His story is not one of continuous triumph, but of persistence, resilience, and integrity. A man who disappeared, who battled inner demons, who withdrew from the world, ultimately returned not to reclaim fame, but to reclaim truth. And in doing so, he reminded us all that music, Real music is a vessel for the soul. As we look back on D'Angelo's journey, we see a legacy defined by depth, courage, and an enduring commitment to authenticity. His influence will echo through generations, a testament to the power of resilience, the beauty of vulnerability, and the timeless soul of a man who dared to disappear and return as the Black Messiah he was always meant to be. D'Angelo's journey is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. From the sacred halls of Richmond churches to the global stage, from soaring triumphs to the silence of retreat, he has lived a life both extraordinary and profoundly human. His music carries the scars and triumphs of that journey, a voice that whispers, seduces, and uplifts all at once. The man who vanished, who wrestled with fame and self, who disappeared into shadows of doubt, returned not just to reclaim his music, but to reclaim himself. Every note of Black Messiah echoes with the wisdom, pain, and redemption he carries. It reminds us that true artistry is inseparable from vulnerability, and that the path to greatness is often forged in solitude and struggle. D'Angelo's legacy is eternal. His influence pulses through neo-soul, R&B, and modern music, inspiring countless artists and touching millions of hearts. The Black Messiah is not merely a title. It is a declaration of survival, authenticity, and the enduring power of the soul. In every groove, every falsetto, every quiet moment of reflection, we hear the man who dared to disappear and returned to remind the world of the timeless magic of real music.